This one's for the photographer that does paid gigs occasionally, maybe on weekends as a side hustle. Usually just accepts payments in cash or Venmo or e-transfer if you're a cool Canadian. You need to invoice every single client that you work with. Every single client that gives you money, you need to send them an invoice. And today, I wanna walk you through how to do that, because if you have no idea how to do that, it's kind of confusing. What do you even put on an invoice? Where do you find a good template for one? You might even be thinking to yourself, I don't need to send invoices. I just do these little gigs. You know, I get paid in cash. It doesn't matter. There are several great reasons to be sending invoices to your clients. And I'm gonna go over them with you. And then I'm gonna show you my invoice template that I created and that I use all the time. And on top of that, I'm gonna be giving you guys this template for free to download in the description. So if you like what you see in this video, you can try it out for free. There's a few good reasons, so let's go over them. Reason number one, appearances. If you want to come across as a true professional, you need to send an invoice, because professional businesses send invoices, especially if you're working with another small business. Now, this is still good when you're working for individuals for like family photos or weddings, that kind of thing. But this is especially good if your clients are small businesses, because they know that a real business should be sending an invoice. And so when you send them an invoice, it comes across as really professional. And a lot of the time, although individuals won't care as much, businesses need the invoice because they need to use it as proof of that they spent money on something to write it off for taxes. Which brings me to point number two. Not only do invoices make you look professional, but they do actually have a real purpose. If you're working for a business, whether it's a massive media company or a little coffee shop, if they're hiring you, they're going to want to write off that as a business expense. To do that properly, they need proof that they spent the money on what they spent it on. And so you giving them an invoice allows them to properly keep record of their expenses and do their taxes. Which leads me to my next point, which is it helps keep you organized and do your taxes and just keep track of all of the money that you're bringing in. It may not seem like a problem now if you're doing one shoot a week or one shoot a month, but if you want to scale up your business, if you want this to be something that can make you a good amount of money, be your full-time job, you need to create a system that is scalable to 5 shoots a week. And you having a record of all the invoices that you've sent out and all the invoices that you have received payment on will make your life a lot easier in terms of keeping track of your money, budgeting, making sure that you actually remember to charge a client, because when things get hectic and you have a week where you have 5 or 7 shoots in one week, now all of a sudden you have a list of these 7 people. And let me tell you, a lot of businesses take their sweet time paying you if you allow them to. So you need to keep track of who has paid you, who needs to pay you, and when they need to pay you, so that you can follow up with them and bug them and say, hey, it's been 30 days, I still haven't received payment. If you could send that along, that would be great. This is also really important if you ever have an issue with a client where on their end, they are supposed to have only paid you a certain amount and they're trying to tell you they overpaid you, or you're trying to tell them they underpaid you. You can line up the bank statements with the invoices and make sure that you have received the proper amount of money you're supposed to. So invoices make you look professional. They help keep you organized. Your clients like them because sometimes they need them as well. So what is the actual practical process of creating an invoice and sending it to your client? This is again one of those things that after time just kind of feels obvious, but if you're starting out, and I remember feeling this way, you just don't necessarily know how to go about doing this stuff. So hopefully this is helpful. If you do find it helpful, hit the like button, maybe subscribe. Want to see more stuff like this. I've been freelancing full-time as my job, my main real job, for coming up on 2 years now. And so I'd love to pass along these little things that I learned. Let's go through my invoice template. I'm gonna show you how I would fill it out and then how I would keep it organized to make sure that I could reference it if I need to. All right, so this is what my invoice template looks like. I have 2 invoice templates. I have one with my bank transfer details on it and one without. When working with bigger companies that have a proper accountant and proper payroll and stuff like that, their preferred payment method is usually a direct deposit or a ETF, an electronic funds transfer, where they take your bank details and they just put the money right into your bank account. This is the most professional way of being paid as a contractor. So if you're planning on working with businesses, I would highly recommend having this as an option for them. It will make you seem more professional. Individuals, like if you're doing weddings or portraits, not as much. They're probably just gonna wanna pay cash or e-transfer. And that's why I have 2. Now it is important to note you don't necessarily need to include the bank details on the invoice. Some people might say this is for, privacy reasons or whatever, is probably not the ideal way of doing it. I've never had a problem with it. If you wanted to just provide that information separately, that would also be fine. All right, so starting from the top. At the very top here, I have my logo. Then in the top right, in big capital letters, it says invoice. Make it really clear what this is. Now there's 2 really important identifying numbers that you need on this invoice. You need the date and you need an invoice number. So first you're gonna fill out the date that you're sending them the invoice. This should be the date that you're sending it and they're receiving it. And that's important because we're gonna set the payment terms at the bottom of the invoice and it's gonna be based on this date. Next, the invoice number. This can be literally whatever you want as long as it's unique and you have some way of keeping it organized. I would recommend like a 6-digit number because that way you're never gonna run out of numbers and you can start this number over each year. Now, when I first started invoicing, I didn't have a lot of clients and I didn't want it to seem like I didn't have a lot of clients. So I didn't want to send an invoice to my client and it be like 00001 and the next one is 00002, because then the client would look at that and be like, oh, this guy never sends invoices. This is the second one he's ever sent. And realistically, there's nothing wrong with that, but I just didn't like that image. So what I decided to do, I actually got this trick from my friend Anthony, is you make the invoice number the date that the invoice has. This way it's a unique number that will continue to count up as the year goes on. And then you add a -1 at the end. So if you send multiple invoices on that day, it's -1, -2, -3. And I have it formatted biggest to smallest. I have it year, month, day. That way, if I have to order the invoice numbers, they'll be immediately in chronological order. All right, now we have 3 main sections of the invoice after the date. We have payable to, which is you. We have billed to, which is your client, and then we have a listing of the services and the costs. Payable to is gonna be your full name, your address, and your contact information. Here in Ontario, I'm registered for HST, which is Harmonized Sales Tax, which means if I'm working with a business, it's good to give them this number. So I have that on there. If you're not registered for HST, don't worry about it. Then I like to put a big line and then billed to. Now you're gonna put the client's contact information. This is something you're gonna wanna ask them for. Just send an email to your client. Hey, I'm putting together the invoice now. What contact information would you like me to use for the business? It's important to ask your client this, especially if they're a business. If they're not a business, if it's just an individual, just put their name and maybe their email address. But if it is a business, you wanna put the proper business address that they have listed. And sometimes when you have a larger business, they have an attention line, it's ATTN, and then a person's name. And this is for them, it's so that they can get the invoice and it can get sent to the right person and you can get paid. Some businesses do this, some don't, so just ask what information they would like to have on the invoice and they'll let you know that. You can really be as specific or vague about the service you provided here, but for tax purposes, or if you ever got audited for some reason, or if they ever got audited, I would imagine it would be helpful to be a little bit specific about the services you performed. Here you have a quantity line, so if you provided multiples of the same thing, then you put the name of the service, the cost for each of those things, and then the total cost if you did multiple of them. And then you add all those up on the list. At the bottom, you have the subtotal, which is the total amount before tax. Then you have your sales tax, and then you have the total amount that the client needs to pay you. So it could look something like this. Quantity 1, service 4 hours event photography coverage, comma, the date that you performed the coverage on. This is not the invoice date, this is the date you actually did the job. Amount each, $1,000, amount $1,000 again. Then you add this all up, put it in the subtotal, figure out the 13% tax, and then put the full amount at the bottom. And there you go, that's the amount the client owes you. Now this should be an amount that you have discussed with the client. Generally speaking, this number here should not be a surprise to you or the client before they see the invoice. Now under this, you need payment terms. Net 15, net 30, and net 60 are really common ones. And what that just means is it is payable within that amount of days from the invoice date. So if it's net 15 days within receiving the invoice, they need to have made that payment. Now, if you have a contract with them, you can stipulate that there is a late fee if they go over the net 15 or net 30. That's its own separate thing. If it's a reoccurring client that you trust, I probably wouldn't recommend charging them a late fee if they are a few days late, because you probably don't want to upset the client if they're gonna use you again, but that's just my opinion. Standard one for most companies is net 30. If you have a company that's willing to do net 15, great. I would recommend not doing net 60 if you can stay away from it. And now you can technically just leave it net 30, but I like to go a little bit of an extra step here and say remit by, and then the date that the net 30 or net whatever would land on. This just makes it extra clear, pay me by this date, please. At the bottom, I like to add just one extra line that says, thanks for choosing Delaney Media. If it's a client I don't know and I don't trust, I usually take payment up front, or at least a good chunk of payment up front, so that I'm not doing a bunch of work and not getting paid for it and potentially having issues. But if it's a client that I know and trust, and it's especially if it's a client that I know is going to use me again in the future, then trusting them to pay me within a 30-day window, I don't have a problem with. Some people will tell you, no, you need to take the money up front, but honestly, I don't have a problem with it. Technically, you can do whatever you want. Oh, and I forgot to mention, save this as a PDF so that it's not like an editable document. This is gonna be a Word doc. You can open it in Word or in your Google Doc, whatever. You input the information and then save it as a PDF file. And then that way it's like, don't send them a Word doc. Don't PDF. And that is how you stay more organized with invoicing as a business, as a photographer. I know this seems like a lot of work, but you just need to do it a couple times to get the hang of it. And also this invoice template will hopefully help you out a bunch because you just gotta fill out each thing. Again, you can download that in the description if it's something that you wanna try out. I'm giving it out for free. If you do use the invoice template, let me know in the comments because I would love to know that it's actually useful. But I think I covered all the bases. If you have any other questions about this kind of thing, let me know in the comments below. Again, I'm not like some business guru. I'm just a photographer who is running my business like this. I'm also still consistently learning things. Like I'm sitting down with an accountant soon for the first time, like a proper accountant to help me go through some of this stuff. So I am not the be all end all knowledge, but I'm just a guy trying to run and scale my freelance photography business. And I know I had a ton of questions when I was starting out on this kind of thing. And I also know a lot of people who don't do invoices or contracts or anything like that for their business. And it's honestly just not a sustainable way of doing things. So I hope you were able to take something away from this. I hope this was helpful. I think I covered all my bases. So thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.